My pleasure.
So if I can give you help me a little bit here, but you trained originally at the London School of Tropical Medicine, is that right?
No, it started before that actually. I used to be an infectious disease clinical doctor and worked a lot with AIDS patients during the 1980s. And that's what put me into epidemiology. And then I spent 1 year or 2 years at the London School of Tropical Medicine in the early 90s. And then I came back to Sweden, and then I became state epidemiologist for Sweden, which means having control over all the infectious diseases.
Which is the job that Anders Tegnell currently has.
So I actually hired him 20 years ago, and then I was his boss, and now he's my boss. But it's working actually quite well.
And you then became chief scientist at the European Centre for Disease Control.
Yep.
And what roles do you have now? Who are you advising at the moment?
I'm advising Anders Tegnell at the Swedish Agency for Public Health on a consultant basis. I'm retired really, so I'm doing this mostly because it's fun.
And the World Health Organization, you were saying you were on a call with them earlier today. Do you have an ongoing relationship with them?
Yes, I'm advising the Director General together with a group of old scientists, but that's unpaid. It's just an honorary post in a way.
So having now, as it were, established your credentials to talk with confidence on this topic, there's been a lot of confused thinking and a lot of confusion about what the correct response to a threat such as COVID-19 should be. And I just wanted to begin by getting your kind of summary thoughts of how Sweden is differing from other countries and why you think that is.
The main reason is that we, or the Swedish government, decided early in January that the measures we should take against the pandemic should be evidence-based. And when you start looking around for the measures that are being taken now by different countries, you find that very few of them have the shred of evidence base. But one we know, that's known for 150 years or more, and that is washing your hands is good for you and good for others when you're in an epidemic. But the rest, like border closures, school closures, social distancing, there's almost no science behind most of these.
So what is the current policy in Sweden? Social distancing is part of the policy, isn't it? What is the regime that Sweden has gone with?
The main difference to other countries is that you're not locked up in your home. If you go out to buy food or groceries or drugs, medicines, there's no police to stop you in the street and ask you what you're doing here. That's one thing. People are asked to stay inside, but there's no reinforcement or enforcement of that. People do it anyway. So that's one. We have the rule that a crowd cannot be bigger than 50 people.
So I can still have an event for 49 people?
Yes.
I want.
You could. And the schools, the upper schools are closed, secondary education and universities are closed, schools up to age 15, 16 are open. What more do we have? The nursing homes or houses for old people are closed to visitors.
So it sounds like it's a moderate social distancing regime then at the moment.
It is. It's very similar to the one that the UK had before. There was a famous paper by the Imperial College, by the modelers who made models for infectious diseases that came out, and the day after you made a U-turn in England.
Yeah, so tell us about that. So the original strategy in the UK became known as a kind of herd immunity strategy. That's what it was called. Before we come on to talk about the imperial model, which I would like to talk about, is it correct to call it herd immunity? And is that the Swedish strategy?
It's not a strategy, but it's a byproduct of the strategy. But the strategy is to protect the old and the frail. Try to minimize their risk of becoming infected and taking care of them if they get infected. And if you do that the way we're doing it, you would probably get herd immunity in the end, but that's a byproduct of it's not the main reason to do it.
So you were saying then, so the initial UK response seemed to be similar to what Sweden is doing now, and you thought that was better?
Yeah. No, I think it was very good actually, and we were very pleased with having the same policy as the UK. That gave some credibility to what we were doing. But then Mr. Johnson made his 180-degree turn.
Yeah, so why, there may have been other political factors involved. He was definitely under a lot of pressure because lots of European countries were doing a formal lockdown at that point. But the turning point did seem to be that Imperial College report, which forecasts 510,000 deaths in the UK with a completely unmitigated approach, 250,000 deaths with a mitigated approach, which is roughly equivalent to what you're doing in Sweden. And then it suggests that it might be as few as 20,000 if we did a full suppression or lockdown. What was your impression of that paper?
I think it's not very good. And the thing that they miss a little is any models for infectious disease spread are very popular. Many people do them. They're good for teaching. They seldom tell you the truth because I make a small parenthesis. Which model could have assumed that the outbreak would start in northern Italy in Europe? Difficult to model that one. And any such model, it looks complicated. There are strange mathematical formula and integral signs and stuff, but it rests on the assumptions. And the assumptions in that article could be heavily criticized for. I won't go through that. It would take the rest of your day if I went through them all. The paper was never published scientifically. It's not peer-reviewed, which a scientific paper should be. It's just an internal departmental report from Imperial. And it's fascinating. I don't think any other scientific endeavor has made such an impression on the world as that rather debatable paper.
So is your impression that it was overly pessimistic?
Yes. Oh, yes. Very much so.
So what, I guess it comes down to some degree of speculation, but what's your impression of how serious the disease is and what kind of fatalities we would be looking at if we had a more moderate or more mitigated approach?
Yeah. What's the number of deaths in the UK now? I don't know.
13,000 and something.
13. So you're getting close to 20 now.
Yeah.
But probably not 510,000. I think, let me back one step. One thing that the model has missed is that it assumes that the hospital capacity will remain the same. And that's not what's happening anywhere. I mean, in Sweden, we've tripled our intensive care capacity, and I think that's happening in the UK as well. But the paper completely overlooks that. It's cites that as a static thing.
But so just to sort of come back on this, like, the argument, what people watching will be asking, and I think what most people who support the lockdown would say, and that is the overwhelming majority of people in politics and in the media, is that the reason the curve is now flattening and that the numbers of deaths are gradually coming down on a daily basis is because of the lockdown, and that shows that the policy has worked. And Professor Neil Ferguson, who led the Imperial papers, suggests that he stands by his prediction that 500,000 odd people would have died had that not taken place. So if it wasn't the lockdown that has been flattening our curve, what else could it have been?
Well, one thing is immunity. The other is that the people who are frail and old will die first. And when that group of people is sort of thinned out, you will get less deaths as well. The other thing is that when you start your exit strategy, that's the favorite word now in all this public health, the exit strategy. When you start that one, you'll have some of the deaths that we had already.
Yes, so I mean, does that mean then that as the disease passes through the population, are we going to see second and third spikes now after this?
It will be part of the exit strategy, because the only way to check that if you're taking away one restriction, let's say we'll open the schools again, as an example. How do you evaluate that? You have to say, numbers are going up again. More people are dying. We have to stop that. We have pulled back that softening and try another. That's what exit strategy will be in all countries. Countries will ease up a little on a restriction, see what happens over the next 2-3 weeks. It didn't work very well. We resume that. We try another restriction. We lift that one. It worked. And so this is, every country will have to do it that way. And that means that the increasing number of deaths will be part of checking which strategy should be kept and not.
So what should we be doing instead?
Well, you can't.
But
I remember when I first heard, which is now 6 weeks ago, about the different draconic measures that were taken, I asked myself, how are they going to climb down from that one? When will they open the schools again? What should be the criterion to open the schools? Did any one of the strong and very decisive politicians in Europe think about how do we get out of this when they introduced it? And I think that would be a problem for the UK as well.
So let's take as a comparison the neighbouring countries in Scandinavia, because a lot of people are sending around these charts that show that Denmark and Norway and Finland have had much fewer deaths on a per capita basis, and Sweden, the rate is still climbing, and they take that as proof, essentially, that Sweden should have gone into a more draconian lockdown. What do you say to those people?
Well, first, it's not true for Denmark. Secondly, one important thing is that Norway, the nursing homes in Norway are usually quite small, whereas the nursing homes in Sweden are quite big, with hundreds of people, which means that if you get the virus into one nursing home in Norway, it will affect far fewer people than a big one. So that's part of the reason. It's not all the reason. For Finland, the epidemic never really took off there. They started their measures before it had even started. But I think we should have this discussion a year from now. Let's decide that. We do this on the 17th of April, 2021. I think that the difference between countries will be quite small in the end.
So that you don't think that the severity of these intervening measures are going to make that much difference?
No, I don't think so. I think, actually, should I tell you what I really think? I almost never do this. I think what we're seeing is a tsunami of a usually quite mild disease, which is sweeping over Europe. And some countries do this, and some countries do that, and some countries don't do that. And in the end, there will be very, very little difference.
So when you say it's a usually quite mild disease, what do you mean by that?
That most people who get it will never even notice they were infected.
So does that mean that you think the actual fatality rate of this disease is much lower than the numbers that have been talked about?
Much, much lower.
So do you have you made any speculations as to what sort of zone the real fatality rate might be in?
I think it will be like a severe influenza season, the same as which would be on an order of 0.1% maybe.